Empty your bag. The words cut through the restaurant like a blade. She didn't move. Didn't argue. Just stood there, while 60 pairs of eyes turned to watch her humiliation. He thought he had all the power. He had no idea who she really was. The crystal chandelier overhead caught the afternoon light, making the entire room feel like it was holding its breath. Olivia stood 3 feet from table 12. Unnaturally still. Her fingers rested against the edge of an empty serving tray. They weren't trembling. They weren't doing anything at all. Daniel Morrison leaned back in his chair, one hand flat on the white tablecloth, the other gesturing, almost carelessly, toward her uniform. His voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume, only certainty. "I'm going to ask you one more time," he said slowly. "Where is it?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved past him. The half-finished wine, the folded napkin, the empty bread basket, then back to his face. "I don't know what you're referring to, sir." Her tone was calm. Too calm. Not defensive. Not apologetic. The kind of calm that made people uncomfortable, because it refused to participate in the panic they expected. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at her the way someone looks at a puzzle they've already decided isn't worth solving. "My watch," he said. His voice dropped slightly. "Vintage. Patek Philippe." A pause, heavier than the others. "My father's gift." Another beat. "It was on this table 15 minutes ago." He leaned forward. "You're the only server who's been near me since I sat down." Olivia's expression didn't change, but something in the room did. The couple at table 9 stopped mid-conversation. The man near the window set his fork down. Even the sommelier, halfway across the dining room, froze in place, bottle still tilted over a glass. She took a breath. Not a nervous one. The kind someone takes before choosing their words very carefully. "I cleared your appetizer plates at 1:47, she said evenly. "I brought your entree at 2:03. I refilled your water twice." A beat. "I didn't see a watch." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me it just vanished?" "I'm telling you I didn't take it." The words hung in the air. Fragile. Dangerous. Then Daniel stood. Not quickly. Not violently. Deliberately. The kind of movement that made it clear the conversation was no longer a conversation. "Then you won't mind if we check." Olivia's fingers moved for the first time. Just barely. A small shift against the tray. Her face remained unreadable. "Check what, exactly?" Daniel didn't answer her. He turned toward the host stand, where the manager had appeared, drawn by the tension like a moth to a flame. "Michael," Daniel said, his voice louder now. "Not a request. I need you to do something for me." The manager approached, hands already raised, a gesture of calm no one had asked for. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sure we can. I need you to bring her bag out here." The room went still. Someone's fork scraped against porcelain. Too loud. A woman at table 6 shifted in her seat, uncomfortable witness to something she couldn't look away from. Michael's eyes darted between them. "Sir, I don't think." "I'm not asking." Daniel's tone didn't rise. It hardened. "Someone took $100,000 watch off my table. She was the only one here." A pause. "So either we involve the police, or we handle this quietly." He gestured toward Olivia without looking at her. Her choice. Olivia finally moved. She set the tray down on the nearest empty table, slowly, with precision. The kind that suggested she was deciding something far bigger than whether or not to comply. When she looked up, her gaze locked onto Daniel's. Not with anger. Not with fear. with something colder. Something that made him shift his weight without realizing it. "If that's what you need," she said quietly. A beat. Her eyes never left his. "Then do it." Michael hesitated, then turned, and disappeared toward the staff room. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of eyes, held breaths, and the terrible understanding that whatever happened next couldn't be undone. Daniel crossed his arms, waiting. Olivia stood exactly where she was, hands loose at her sides, her expression carved from stone. And when Michael returned, carrying a red leather bag, every person in that dining room leaned forward without meaning to. Michael set the red leather bag on the table. Not gently, not carelessly, somewhere in between, like he was handling evidence he didn't want to be responsible for. The bag sat there, small, expensive, out of place against the white linen. Daniel stared at it the way someone stares at a door they're not sure they should open. But his hand moved anyway. He reached for the zipper. Olivia didn't stop him, didn't say a word. She just stood there, 3 feet away, watching him with that same unreadable expression that had unsettled him from the beginning. The zipper made a sound, quiet, sharp. It cut through the silence like something breaking. Daniel's fingers hesitated for half a second. Then he opened the bag wide and looked inside. The first thing he pulled out was a phone. Standard. Nothing expensive. He set it on the table. Then a small wallet. Worn leather. Practical. He opened it. A few bills. A credit card. A driver's license. He glanced at the name, quickly, then set it down beside the phone. Next came a pair of reading glasses, a pack of mints, a folded receipt. He was moving faster now, less methodical, more desperate. His hand dipped back into the bag, searching, fingers brushing against fabric, feeling for metal, for weight, for something that shouldn't be there. Nothing. He turned the bag upside down. A lipstick rolled across the tablecloth. A hair tie. A crumpled tissue. And then, something heavier. It landed with a soft thud. Daniel froze. So did the room. It wasn't a watch. It was a piece of paper. Folded. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. Expensive. The kind of paper that wasn't meant for receipts or grocery lists. Daniel stared at it. Then, slowly, he reached for it, unfolded it, and his face changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Enough that Olivia noticed. Enough that Michael took a step closer. Enough that the woman at table 6 leaned forward, in her seat, trying to see. Daniel's eyes moved across the paper. Once. Twice. His jaw worked, like he was trying to form words and couldn't. Then his hand dropped. The paper fell back onto the table. Face up. Michael leaned in, just enough to see. And his expression shifted too. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then something that looked uncomfortably close. To panic. "Mr. Morrison, don't." Daniel's voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks. He looked up at Olivia. And for the first time since this started, he didn't look certain anymore. "Where did you get this?" Olivia didn't answer immediately. She let the question hang there, let him sit with it. Then, finally, she spoke. "It was in my bag, Mr. Morrison." Her tone hadn't changed. Still calm, still even. "Where I keep my personal belongings." Daniel's hand moved toward the paper, stopped halfway, then fell back to his side. This is... He didn't finish. Couldn't. Because what was written on that paper wasn't just proof that she hadn't stolen anything. It was proof of something else entirely. Something he hadn't considered. Something that made every word he'd said in the last 10 minutes feel like a mistake he couldn't take back. Olivia's eyes stayed on his, unblinking. Is there anything else you'd like to search, sir? The question landed like a slap. Quiet, controlled, devastating. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, and for the first time in a very long time, he had no idea what to say. Breathe. No one spoke. Everyone understood. If this story has already pulled you in, subscribe, and stay until the end. The paper stayed where it fell, face up, center of the table. Between them, Daniel hadn't moved, hadn't looked away from it. His breathing had changed, just slightly, the kind of shift that happens when someone realizes they've miscalculated something they can't undo. Michael stood frozen beside the table, his hand halfway to his collar, his eyes darting between Daniel and Olivia, trying to read a situation that had already slipped completely out of his control. The dining room was still holding its breath. 60 people watching a confrontation that had stopped being about a missing watch and become something else entirely. Olivia took a single step forward, not aggressive, not submissive, just present. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before, but somehow it carried further. The certificate of authenticity, she said. Not a question. A statement. For a 1942 Patek Philippe, Calatrava, reference 1512. Daniel's eyes snapped up to hers. How do you, serial number 638492, she continued, her tone unchanged, clinical, precise. Sold through Mitchell & Sons Fine Jewelry on October 4th. A pause. 3 weeks ago. The air in the room shifted. Someone at table 9 whispered something. The man near the window set down his wine glass, slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement might break whatever was happening. Daniel stared at her. Really stared. Not with anger anymore, with confusion, with something that looked uncomfortably close to fear. You. He stopped, started again. You work here. It wasn't a question, but it sounded like one, like he was trying to convince himself of something he was no longer sure of. Olivia's expression didn't change. I do. Then how do I know the serial number of your father's watch? She finished the question for him, let it sit there, heavy, uncomfortable. Then she reached forward, slowly, and picked up the certificate from the table. Her fingers were steady, completely steady. She held it up so he could see it clearly. The embossed logo at the top, the handwritten serial number, the signature at the bottom, elegant, practiced, unmistakable. Because I sold it to him, she said quietly. The room went silent. Not the tense silence from before, a different kind. The kind that comes when everyone realizes they've been watching the wrong story unfold. Daniel's face drained of color. Not all at once. Slowly, like water draining from a glass. You. His voice cracked. Just barely. That's not. He looked at Michael. Then back at Olivia. Then at the certificate still in her hand. Mitchell & Sons is one of the most respected jewelry houses in the country, he said. But his voice had lost its certainty. You can't just... I don't just work there, Mr. Morrison. Olivia's tone was still calm, still even. But now there was something else underneath it. Something that made every person in that room lean forward without realizing it. She lowered the certificate, set it back on the table, smoothed it once with her fingertips, then looked up at him. I own it. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples everywhere. Daniel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Michael took a step back, instinctive, like he just realized he was standing too close to something dangerous. The woman at table 6 covered her mouth with her hand, and Olivia just stood there, hands at her sides, expression unchanged, watching Daniel Morrison try to process what she'd just said. watching him realize, slowly, painfully, that the woman he'd just accused of theft in front of 50 witnesses, the woman whose bag he demanded to search, the woman he'd treated like she was beneath him, was the same woman who'd personally helped his father choose the most meaningful gift he'd ever received. Daniel's hand moved toward the edge of the table, gripped it, his knuckles went white. I didn't. He stopped, swallowed. I didn't know. Olivia tilted her head, just slightly. No, she said softly. You didn't. A pause. You didn't ask. The silence that followed wasn't just uncomfortable, it was suffocating. And somewhere, in the back of Daniel Morrison's mind, a single thought began to take shape, a thought that would stay with him long after this moment ended. He had made a mistake, and everyone knew it. Daniel didn't move. Couldn't. His hand still gripped the edge of the table, white-knuckled, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Olivia stood exactly where she was, 3 feet away, close enough to see every shift in his expression, every failed attempt to find words that might undo what had already been done. The certificate lay between them, a single piece of paper, but it felt heavier than anything else in the room. Michael cleared his throat. Quiet. Apologetic. Miss. He stopped. Started again. Ms. Mitchell, I'm so. It's fine, Michael. Olivia's voice cut through his apology with surgical precision. Not cruel. Just final. She turned her attention back to Daniel. Her gaze steady, unblinking. Your father, she said quietly, came into the store on a Thursday afternoon. He spent 2 hours looking at watches. He didn't want just anything. He wanted something that would last. Daniel's jaw tightened. But he didn't interrupt. He told me it was for his son. That you'd just closed a deal you'd been working on for 3 years. She paused. He was proud of you. The words landed like a physical blow. Daniel flinched. Actually flinched. He asked me to help him choose something that would mean something. Not just expensive. Meaningful. Olivia's voice stayed even. But there was something underneath it now. Something quiet. Something that made the entire room feel like it was leaning in to hear her. So I showed him the Calatrava. 1942. One of 12 ever made in that configuration. I told him it was a watch meant for someone who understood value. Real value. Not just price. She let that sit. Then continued. He held it for a long time. Turned it over in his hands. Asked me if I thought his son would appreciate it. A beat. I told him any son would be lucky to receive a gift chosen with that much care. Daniel's breathing had gone shallow. His eyes fixed on her face, but not with anger anymore. With something else. Something raw. He bought it, Olivia said. Paid in full. Asked me to wrap it personally. To include the certificate and a handwritten note explaining the history of the piece. She gestured toward the paper on the table. That certificate. Daniel looked down at it. Then back at her. His voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. Why? He stopped. Tried again. Why are you working here? It was the wrong question. He knew it the second the words left his mouth. But it was the only one his mind could form. Olivia's expression shifted. Just barely. A flicker of something. Disappointment, maybe. That passed so quickly it might not have been there at all. Because my father asked me to. She said it simply. Like it explained everything. And in a way, it did. He built Mitchell & Sons from nothing. Spent 40 years establishing a reputation based on one principle. Understand the people you serve. Her eyes never left Daniel's. He told me that before I took over. Before I sat behind a desk and made decisions that affected people's livelihoods. I needed to understand what it felt like to be on the other side. A pause. To serve. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Pointed. Daniel's face had gone pale. So I've been working in restaurants, hotels, retail. For 6 months. She tilted her head slightly. Learning what it's like to be invisible to people who think they're more important than you are. The room was so quiet now you could hear the chandelier crystals shifting in the air conditioning. I've been yelled at, dismissed, ignored, treated like I was too stupid to understand basic instructions. Her voice stayed calm, clinical, but every word landed like a verdict. But this. She gestured toward the table, toward the bag, toward the certificate. Is the first time someone has accused me of being a thief. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. His hand finally released the table, fell to his side. I didn't. You did. Olivia's voice was still quiet, but it cut through his excuse like a blade. You looked at me, decided I was someone who could be guilty, and demanded I prove I wasn't. She took a breath. In front of everyone. The silence stretched. Long. Unbearable. Daniel's throat worked. Once. Twice. He stopped. Because what could he say? What words existed that could undo the last 15 minutes? Olivia reached down. Picked up her wallet. Her phone. The reading glasses. One by one, she placed them back into the red leather bag. Slowly. Deliberately. No one moved. No one spoke. When she finished, she zipped the bag closed. The same sound that had started this. And looked at Daniel one last time. Your watch, she said quietly. I hope you find it. Then she turned. And walked away. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just away. Her footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Every eye in the restaurant followed her until she disappeared through the staff entrance. And Daniel Morrison, billionaire, dealmaker, man who'd never been told no, stood alone at table 12, surrounded by witnesses, holding nothing but the certificate of a watch he'd lost, and the crushing weight of a mistake he had no idea how to fix. Daniel stood there for 10 seconds. Maybe 15. Time felt strange, stretched thin, like the entire room was waiting for him to do something, say something, be something other than what he was in that moment. A man who'd made a terrible mistake in front of 50 witnesses. His hand still held the certificate. The paper had creased where his fingers gripped it. He looked down. Saw his father's name written in elegant script beside the purchase date. October 4th. 3 weeks ago. He remembered that day. His father had called him that evening, excited, talking about a surprise, about legacy, about time. Daniel had been distracted. On another call. He'd barely listened. Now he couldn't stop hearing it. Michael approached. Carefully. The way someone approaches a wounded animal. Mr. Morrison. Don't. Daniel's voice was hollow. Just don't. Michael stopped. Hands raised slightly. Uncertain. Should I? Is there anything? The watch, Daniel said. He wasn't looking at Michael. He was staring at the empty chair across from him. The chair he'd been sitting in when this started. It has to be here. Sir, I can have the staff. No. Daniel's voice sharpened. No more staff. No more. He stopped. Set the certificate down. Ran a hand through his hair. I'll find it myself. He dropped to one knee. Right there. In the middle of the dining room. And started searching under the table. The movement was so unexpected, so out of character, that several people actually gasped. Daniel Morrison. CEO. Billionaire. On his hands and knees on a restaurant floor. His fingers brushed against table legs, chair rungs, the edge of the Persian rug beneath his table. Nothing. He shifted. Reached further. His sleeve caught on something, tore slightly, but he didn't stop. Didn't care. The watch had to be here. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, if he'd done all this for nothing. Michael crouched down beside him. Mr. Morrison, please, let me help. It was right here. Daniel's voice had changed. Less controlled now. Edges fraying. I set it down when I ordered. Right here on the table. I remember. I looked at it. I was checking the time. His hand moved faster. More desperate. It can't just disappear. But even as he said it, even as his fingers swept across marble tile and found nothing, he knew. He knew this wasn't about the watch anymore. Maybe it never had been. He sat back on his heels, breathing hard, staring at the empty space under the table like it might somehow give him answers. Sir. Michael's voice was gentle. Too gentle. Perhaps we should check the security footage. We can review. She didn't take it. Daniel said it before Michael could finish. Said it quietly. Definitively. Like he was trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. I know. Michael nodded. I know that now, sir. Daniel pushed himself up. Slowly. His knees protested. He wasn't used to kneeling, and for a moment he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. When he straightened, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. Suit jacket wrinkled. Tie askew. Hair disheveled. He looked like someone who'd lost something far more important than a watch. The couple at table 9 was whispering. The man near the window had his phone out, not even trying to hide it anymore. The woman at table 6 was shaking her head slowly, lips pressed together in obvious disapproval. Daniel felt it. All of it. Every stare. Every whisper. Every silent judgment. He'd been in boardrooms where millions of dollars hung on his next word. He'd negotiated deals that made headlines. He'd stood in front of shareholders and defended decisions that could have destroyed everything he'd built. But this was different. This was personal. This was public. And there was no PR team to spin it. No lawyers to make it go away. Just him. And the consequences of what he'd done. Michael cleared his throat. Would you like me to bring her back? To apologize? Daniel's jaw tightened. She won't come back. Sir. Would you? Daniel looked at him directly for the first time since Olivia left. If someone did that to you, in front of all these people, would you come back just because they asked? Michael didn't answer. Didn't need to. They both knew. Daniel picked up the certificate, folded it carefully, deliberately, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Right over his heart. I need to leave. Of course, sir. I'll have your... No. Daniel's voice was firm. Final. I'll walk. He moved past Michael. Past the other tables. Past the sommelier who was trying very hard not to make eye contact. Every step felt like it took more effort than it should. And just before he reached the door, just before he could escape into the afternoon air and pretend this hadn't happened, he heard it. Quiet, but unmistakable. Someone at one of the tables, he didn't know who, said just loud enough for him to hear. Did you see that? And someone else responded. She owned the place that sold him the watch. Can you imagine? Daniel's hand froze on the door handle. He didn't turn around. Didn't defend himself. Just stood there for one long, terrible second, feeling the full weight of what he'd done, and then pushed through the door into the sunlight. The street was busy. People everywhere. None of them knew. None of them had seen. For them, it was just another Tuesday afternoon. But for Daniel Morrison, nothing would ever be just another Tuesday again. Daniel walked 3 blocks. 5. He lost count. The city moved around him, cars honking, pedestrians brushing past, the distant wail of a siren. But none of it registered. His mind was somewhere else entirely. Back in that dining room, watching Olivia's face as he demanded they search her bag, seeing the certificate fall onto the table, hearing her voice, calm, devastated, as she told him she'd been the one who helped his father. He stopped at a crosswalk. The light was red. People crowded around him, waiting. He reached into his pocket, muscle memory, to check the time. His fingers found empty space where the watch should have been. The irony wasn't lost on him. The light changed. People moved forward. Daniel didn't. He just stood there, hands still in his pocket, staring at nothing. Someone bumped into him, muttered something he didn't catch, kept walking. Daniel finally moved, crossed the street, found himself standing outside a small coffee shop, the kind with outdoor seating and chalkboard menus. He sat down, not because he wanted coffee, because his legs didn't feel steady anymore. A server appeared, young, maybe 22, eager smile already in place. "What can I get you?" Daniel looked up at her. Really looked. Noticed the way she held her notepad, ready, professional. Noticed the name tag clipped slightly crooked on her apron. Noticed that she was a person. Not just someone there to serve him. "Just water," he said quietly. "Please." She nodded. Disappeared inside. Daniel leaned back in the metal chair. It was uncomfortable. Too small. But he didn't move. His phone buzzed. Once. Twice. He ignored it. The server returned with a glass of water, ice clinking softly, and set it down with a smile. "Anything else?" "No," Daniel said. Then, quickly, before she could leave, "Thank you." She blinked. Like the words surprised her. "Of course." And she walked away. Daniel picked up the glass, set it back down without drinking. His reflection stared back at him from the surface, distorted, fragmented, and he had to look away. He pulled out his phone, opened his messages. His father's name was third from the top. The last text had been 2 days ago. "Dad, did you get a chance to open it yet?" Daniel had replied, "Been swamped. Soon." That was it. 2 words. Dismissive. Distracted. He scrolled up. Found the message from 3 weeks ago. "Dad, found something special for you today. Can't wait for you to see it." Daniel had sent back a thumbs up emoji. Nothing else. He closed his eyes. Felt something tighten in his chest, sharp, uncomfortable, and forced himself to breathe through it. When he opened his eyes, he scrolled further, looking for, he wasn't sure what, proof, maybe, that he wasn't always this person, that he used to care about things that mattered. But the messages told a different story. "Dad, want to grab lunch this week?" Daniel slammed. "Rain check." "Dad, how's the Mercer deal going?" Daniel, "Fine." "Dad, thinking of you." Daniel, no response. Daniel set the phone down, face down, like that might somehow make it less real. A couple walked past, holding hands, laughing about something, and he watched them until they disappeared around the corner. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A text from Michael. "Michael, sir, I found something on the security footage. We should talk." Daniel stared at the message. Read it twice. then typed back, "What did you find?" The response came almost immediately. "Michael, the watch. I know where it is." Daniel's heart skipped. His fingers moved before his brain could catch up. Where? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Michael, you're not going to like it." Daniel waited. The dots kept blinking. Finally, "Michael, you put it in your jacket pocket. At 1:52. Right before you ordered the entree." Daniel went completely still. "Read the message again." Then again. "Michael, the footage is clear. You took it off to check something on your phone. Put it in your inside pocket. I think you forgot." Daniel's hand moved to his jacket. Slowly, like he was afraid of what he might find. His fingers slipped into the inside breast pocket. The one he never used. The one he'd probably checked 1,000 times today without thinking. And there, nestled against fabric, cool metal brushed against his fingertips. He pulled it out. The Patek Philippe. Vintage. Calatrava. His father's gift. It sat in his palm. Perfect, undamaged, exactly where he'd put it. And Daniel felt the ground drop out from underneath him. She didn't take it. Of course she didn't take it. She'd never even touched it. And he had. God, he had. He set the watch down on the table. Stared at it. His phone buzzed again. "Michael, sir?" Daniel couldn't respond. Couldn't move. Because the watch being in his pocket meant something far worse than it being stolen. It meant every word he'd said. Every accusation. Every moment of that public humiliation had been based on nothing. On his own mistake. His own carelessness. His own inability to even check his own pockets before destroying someone else's dignity. The server walked past, the same young woman, and glanced at the watch on the table. "That's beautiful," she said casually. "Family heirloom?" Daniel looked up at her. "Yeah," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "Something like that." She smiled. Kept walking. And Daniel sat there. Alone. Holding a watch that had cost him far more than $100,000. It had cost him something he didn't know if he could ever get back. If you've made it this far, hit subscribe, because what he does next will define everything. Daniel sat at that coffee shop table for 20 minutes. Maybe longer. The watch lay in front of him, catching afternoon light, ticking steadily forward while everything inside him felt stuck. Frozen. Unable to move past the single thought that kept circling his mind. What have I done? He picked up his phone. Stared at Michael's message. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He should respond. Should say something. But what? "Thanks for confirming I'm an idiot. Appreciate you proving I destroyed someone's dignity over my own carelessness." He set the phone down. Picked up the watch instead. Turned it over in his hands, the same way his father probably had in Mitchell and Sons. Feeling the weight of it. The craftsmanship. The history. His father had spent 2 hours choosing this. 2 hours thinking about him. Caring about what it would mean. And Daniel had barely spent 2 minutes thinking about his father in the last month. He closed his eyes. Tried to remember the last real conversation they'd had. Not texts. Not quick phone calls squeezed between meetings. A real conversation. He couldn't. The memory just wasn't there. When had that happened? When had he become someone who sent thumbs-up emojis to his own father? The server came by again, the young woman, refilling his water without him asking. "You okay?" She said it casually, but there was something genuine in her voice. Actual concern. Daniel looked up. "No," he said. The honesty surprised him. Not really. She hesitated. Then, bad day. Bad. He stopped, shook his head. Bad choices. She didn't pry, just nodded, the way someone does when they understand that sometimes people need to sit with their mistakes. Water's free, she said. Stay as long as you need. Then she walked away, and Daniel felt something crack in his chest. A small kindness. From a stranger. No judgment. No questions. Just humanity. The kind he hadn't shown to Olivia. He pulled out his phone again. This time he didn't hesitate. He opened a new search. Typed, Mitchell & Sons Fine Jewelry. The website loaded. Elegant. Understated. The kind of site that spoke of legacy, of generations, of care. He clicked on About. And there, at the top of the page, was a photo. A man in his 70s. Silver hair. Kind eyes. Standing in front of a glass display case filled with watches. The caption read, Robert Mitchell, founder, Understanding Value Begins with Understanding People. Below that, another photo. Younger. Professional. A woman in a tailored suit, standing in the same location. But the photo had been taken recently. Contemporary. The caption, Olivia Mitchell, CEO continuing a legacy of excellence and integrity. Daniel stared at the photo. At her face. Composed, confident, nothing like the uniform and the careful politeness she'd worn in the restaurant. But the eyes were the same. That steady gaze that had unsettled him from the beginning. He scrolled down. Found a bio. Olivia Mitchell graduated summa cum laude from Wharton with degrees in business and art history. After spending 5 years working in acquisitions at Christie's, she returned to the family business to prepare for succession. In her father's words, before she leads, she must understand what it means to serve. Daniel's throat went tight. Before she leads, she must understand what it means to serve. She told him that. Standing in the restaurant. While he held her bag and searched through her personal belongings like she was a criminal. She told him. And he hadn't heard it. Hadn't cared. Because all he could see was a waitress. Someone beneath him. Someone who didn't matter. He closed the browser. Set the phone down. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, Daniel Morrison felt ashamed. Not embarrassed. Not defensive. Ashamed. Of who he'd been in that restaurant. Of who he'd become without noticing. The server walked past again. He stopped her. Excuse me. She turned. Yeah. What's your name? She blinked. Surprised by the question. Jessica. Jessica, Daniel repeated. He reached into his wallet. Pulled out $200 bills. Set them on the table next to the single glass of water. Thank you, he said. For the kindness. Her eyes widened. Sir, that's way too much. It's not. Daniel stood. Picked up the watch. Slipped it carefully into his pocket. The right one this time. It's exactly right. He walked away before she could argue. Left the coffee shop. Stood on the sidewalk as people rushed past. Everyone going somewhere. And he realized he had no idea where he was supposed to go from here. He couldn't go back to the restaurant. Couldn't face Michael. Couldn't pretend this hadn't happened. But he also couldn't just walk away. Not from this. His phone was in his hand before he'd made a conscious decision. He opened his messages. Scrolled past Michael. Past colleagues. Past business contacts. Until he found his father's name. He stared at it for a long moment. Then typed, Dad, can we talk? He hit send before he could overthink it. Three dots appeared almost immediately. Dad, of course. Everything okay? Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, no. But I want it to be. Another pause. Dad, I'm home. Come over. Daniel closed his eyes. Breathed. Then typed. On my way. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. Started walking. Not aimlessly this time. With direction. With purpose. The watch pressed against his chest, a weight he was finally ready to carry. And somewhere, in an office on the other side of the city, Olivia Mitchell sat at her desk, going through emails, living her real life, completely unaware that the man who'd humiliated her 3 hours ago was finally starting to understand what he'd done. Daniel's father lived in a brownstone on the Upper East Side. 3 stories. Ivy climbing the brick facade. A blue door Daniel had walked through 1,000 times. But somehow it felt different today. Heavier. He stood on the steps for a moment. Hand on the railing. The watch still pressed against his chest. Then he knocked. Footsteps inside. Slow. Deliberate. The door opened. Robert Morrison stood there, 73 years old, silver hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He looked at Daniel. Really looked. The way fathers do when they know something's wrong before a single word is spoken. Come in, he said quietly. Daniel stepped inside. The house smelled the same as always. Old books, coffee, the faint trace of his mother's perfume even though she'd been gone 5 years. Robert closed the door. Gestured toward the living room. Sit. Daniel didn't argue. He moved to the couch, the same one he'd sat on as a kid, and his father settled into the armchair across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Robert leaned forward slightly. What happened? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, started again. I made a mistake. Robert waited. A bad one. Still waiting. Daniel pulled the watch from his pocket. Set it on the coffee table between them. I lost this today, he said. Or, I thought I did. His father's eyes moved to the watch. Back to Daniel's face. And I accused someone of stealing it. Daniel's voice was flat. Hollow. Publicly. In front of 50 people. I demanded they search her bag. Humiliated her. Robert's expression didn't change. But something shifted in his eyes. Her. A waitress. Daniel forced the word out. Except, she wasn't just a waitress. He told him everything. The restaurant. The accusation. The red leather bag. The certificate. The moment he'd realized, too late, who Olivia really was. And finally, the text from Michael. The watch in his own pocket the entire time. When he finished, the silence felt like a living thing. Robert sat back in his chair. His hands folded in his lap. Mitchell and Sons, he said finally. That's where you got it. Daniel nodded. The woman who helped me. His father stopped. Looked at the watch on the table. She was young. Professional. Knew everything about the piece. She asked me what you valued. Not what you owned, what you valued. He met Daniel's eyes. I told her you valued achievement. Success. Building something that mattered. A pause. She asked me if you valued people. Daniel felt something twist inside him. What did you say? Robert didn't answer right away. He reached forward, picked up the watch, turned it over in his hands, the same way Daniel had done at the coffee shop. I said I hoped so, he said quietly. I told her you were my son, and that underneath all the success and the pressure, there was still the boy who used to care about things beyond balance sheets. He set the watch down. She smiled. Said she believed that the watch would be a good reminder. Daniel's throat felt tight. A reminder of what? That time, Robert said, is the only thing we can't buy back. The words landed like stones. Daniel looked away, toward the window, toward anywhere that wasn't his father's face. I don't know who I've become, he said, his voice barely audible. I don't know when. He stopped, swallowed. When did I become someone who treats people like that? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then, you've been building an empire, Daniel. And empires have a way of making you forget you're standing on the backs of other people. Daniel flinched. I didn't mean to. I know. His father's voice was gentle, but firm. But intent doesn't erase impact. He leaned forward. That woman, Olivia, she didn't have to tell you who she was. She could have let you search her bag, found nothing, and walked away. Let you live with the embarrassment. A pause. But she told you. Do you know why? Daniel shook his head. Because she wanted you to understand what you'd done. Not to punish you. To teach you. Robert picked up the watch again. Held it out toward Daniel. This piece, it's not just about time. It's about value. Real value. The kind that has nothing to do with price tags or status. Daniel took the watch. Felt the weight of it in his palm. I don't know how to fix this, he said. Robert stood. Moved to the window. Looked out at the street below. You can't fix it, he said simply. Not completely. What you did, that stays with her. That memory. He turned back. But you can choose what you do next. You can choose to learn from it. To be different. A pause. Or you can do what most people do. Rationalize it. Minimize it. Forget it. He met Daniel's eyes. Which kind of man do you want to be? Daniel looked down at the watch. At the hands still moving forward. Still counting time he couldn't buy back. I want to be better, he said quietly. I want to be the person you thought I still was. Robert crossed the room. Sat down beside him on the couch. Put a hand on his son's shoulder. Then start, he said. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. Daniel nodded. Felt something shift inside him. Small, fragile, but real. I need to find her, he said. Robert's hand tightened slightly. Why? To apologize. Will she want to hear it? Daniel closed his eyes. Probably not. Then why? Because. He opened his eyes. Looked at his father. Because she deserves to hear it. Whether she accepts it or not. Robert studied him for a long moment. Then nodded. Okay. He stood. Moved toward the hallway. I'll make coffee. You figure out what you're going to say. He paused in the doorway. And Daniel. Yeah. Whatever you do. Don't make this about you feeling better. Make it about her being heard. Then he disappeared into the kitchen. And Daniel sat there. Alone with a watch that finally meant something. Trying to find words that might begin to repair what he'd broken. 2 days passed before Daniel found the courage. 48 hours of rehearsing words that never sounded right. Of standing outside Mitchell and Sons 3 separate times. And walking away. On the 3rd morning, his father called. Did you do it yet? No. Why not? Because what if she doesn't want to hear it? Silence. Then. The question isn't whether she'll forgive you. The question is whether you're brave enough to face what you did. Daniel looked out the window. at the city moving below. Okay, he said quietly. Mitchell and Sons occupied a corner building in the Diamond District. Elegant storefront, gold lettering, display windows that caught the morning light. Daniel stood across the street, watching. His hand moved to his pocket. Found the watch. He'd been carrying it every day. Not wearing it, just carrying it. A reminder. He crossed the street, pushed open the door. The bell chimed. A young man behind the counter looked up. Good morning. How can I help you? I'm looking for Olivia Mitchell. The man's smile shifted. More careful now. Do you have an appointment? No. But I need to speak with her. It's personal. The man nodded slowly, disappeared through a door. Daniel stood there, surrounded by watches, rings, all these objects people bought to mark moments. And he wondered if any of them had ever been used to apologize for destroying someone's dignity. Footsteps. The door opened. Olivia. Charcoal suit. Hair pulled back. The same composed expression from the website. But when her eyes found his, something flickered. She stopped 3 feet away. The same distance she'd kept in the restaurant. Mr. Morrison. Professional. Neutral. Not warm. Ms. Mitchell. Thank you for seeing me. I haven't decided if I'm seeing you yet. She crossed her arms. What do you want? All his rehearsed words disappeared. I came to apologize. What I did was inexcusable. I accused you without evidence. I humiliated you publicly. I treated you like... He forced himself to say it. Like you didn't matter. Olivia's expression didn't change. Yes, she said quietly. You did. The simplicity of it, the lack of anger, made it worse. Daniel pulled out the watch. I found it. 2 hours after everything. It was in my jacket the entire time. I know that doesn't change anything. But I needed you to know. It was my mistake. And you paid the price for it. Olivia looked at the watch. Then back at his face. I already knew that. How? Because I've worked in service for 6 months. I've seen this a dozen times. Someone loses something, panics, blames the nearest easy target. She tilted her head. The only difference is that most people don't have the resources to demand a public search. Daniel felt something sink in his chest. Then why did you tell me who you were? Because you needed to understand what you'd done. You needed to feel even a fraction of what I felt. A pause. Did it work? Daniel looked down. Yes. Good. She turned, like the conversation was over. Wait, please. I know nothing I say can undo it. But I need you to know. I don't want to be the person I was that day. Olivia turned back slowly. Then don't be. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough, Mr. Morrison. Change requires action. Consistent action. Every single day. She moved closer. 1 step. Do you know what bothered me most? It wasn't the accusation. It wasn't even the search. It was that you never once considered I might be telling the truth. You looked at my uniform and decided you already knew everything about me. Daniel couldn't speak. That's what you need to change. Not just with me. With everyone. She stepped back. Your apology, I hear it. I acknowledge it. But I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The words felt exactly right. I understand. Olivia nodded. Started to turn. Stopped. Your father came in yesterday. He told me what happened. Asked me to give you a chance to make this right. She met his eyes. I told him I would listen. Once. I didn't promise anything beyond that. You just used your one chance. Then she walked away, back through the door, and left Daniel standing alone, with a watch that meant more now than it ever had, and the understanding that some mistakes don't get fixed with a single apology. They get carried, for however long it takes. He slipped the watch back into his pocket, turned toward the door, and as he stepped outside, he made himself a promise. He would be better, not for redemption, not for forgiveness, but because Olivia Mitchell had been right. Trying wasn't enough. He had to actually change, and that started right now. Some mistakes can't be undone with a single apology, but real change doesn't end with understanding. It begins with what comes next. If this story made you feel something, subscribe, because the next story asks an even harder question. We'll see you in the next one.